My name is Amanda Hornberger. I'm thrilled to welcome you to this special program of Literature Berks. I'm the program director at the Jewish Federation of Reading Berks and co-chair of Literature Berks. And on behalf of our committee, we're thrilled to welcome you tonight. Literature Berks is a community-wide celebration of books and authors presented by the Jewish Federation of Reading Berks in partnership with the Exeter Community Library and the Jewish Book Council. In the chat, you're going to see a link shortly to purchase a copy of Quieting the Silence. We also ask that if you have questions throughout the chat, throughout the event, that you put it in the chat function. You could also put it in the Q&A, and we're going to do our best to answer questions throughout the program. This important panel conversation is focusing on real stories of mental health struggles and suicide, as well as the stigmas associated with mental illness, and will be moderated by Rabbi Yosef Lipsker, a consultant for Karen since 2000, and Dr. Paul Delfin, a licensed psychologist. I'm pleased to introduce Sherry Pendov. I'm sorry about that. Yes. Panka, thank you. She's been writing about mental health and addiction in the Jewish community for much of the past decade, first with the Jewish Family and Career Services of Atlanta, and currently with the Blue Dove Foundation. She edited Quieting the Silence personal stories and wrote many of the chapters in the book. Thank you, Sherry.
Hi, everyone. Writing this book has been one of the most amazing jobs I've had in a long career of writing. Just really briefly, the book is about, like Amanda said, personal stories, and the purpose of the book is to bring these stories into the open, and these authors who contributed their story, who are so courageous in doing so, they want to help people understand that if, you know, those who are going through similar situations of addiction or depression, anxiety, OCD, whatever the the book covers them all, that they're not alone, and that there, you know, there is, I hate to use a cliche, but light at the end of the tunnel. And so working with these authors has been amazing. Some of the authors came to us. We went and got some of the authors. We knew some of the authors. I wrote, like Amanda said, many of the books based on interviews, and the stories, some of them are heartbreaking. Some of them are, I mean, they're all uplifting at the end. And I'm just going to talk really briefly about why we called it Quieting the Silence. People don't want to talk about mental illness. There's a stigma and shame attached to it. And we wanted to get people, the whole purpose of the book is to get the conversation going. So we wanted to quiet that silence and start the conversation. So I hope that makes sense. That's kind of how we talk about it. And I'm not going to take up too much more time because I really want to hand this to Jennifer, who wrote one of the stories in our book, probably the most heartbreaking story, and she can tell you about it. But she's terrific about sharing it. And with no further talk from me, Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you to all of you who are here for having me tonight. It's an honor to be speaking with you. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Jennifer Greenberg. I'm 41 years old. I live in a cute little house in the Atlanta suburbs. My two children, Ethan and Layla, are the most incredible people in the universe. And I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by some of the most wonderful and generous family and friends that anybody could ask for. I love my job in marketing. You know, my life sounds pretty good, right? And it is. It's a beautiful picture and it's true. I'm really very lucky. But it's not quite that easy, not quite that perfect. There's something really big missing from my life, something huge. You see, about 4.5 years ago, my husband died. On October 15th, 2016, my most horrible nightmare came true. My husband, Adam, committed suicide. It's really hard. It's hard to know. It's hard to say. I'm sure it's really hard to hear. The weird thing is, I think people would be less uncomfortable if he died in another way. I think it'd be less difficult to be somewhere and say, my husband died of cancer, had a heart attack. People hate medical diseases, but they understand them. There's a tumor, there's a blockage, there's something awful that medicine just couldn't fix. No one says a stroke. Why couldn't he just shake it off? But with suicide, it's just an uncomfortable silence. There's an unspoken judgment and so many questions. What happened? Was it sudden? Did he suffer from depression, anxiety? Jen, did you know? Were you surprised? And that's really okay. I'm okay with the questions, but it really does, and it has given me a lot of pause, because if people are uncomfortable with the cause of his death, think how hard it would have been for them to understand how he was feeling while he was still alive. I have to tell you, Adam was an incredible person. We met in college. He knew right away that we were meant to be, and to be honest, it took me a while to figure it out. And after a couple of years of being just friends, I finally realized that he was also the one for me. He was so much fun to be around. He was spontaneous and funny. He knew everyone, and he remembered details from everybody's stories. He was sarcastic and funny. He was fiercely loyal to his family and friends. He was really the kind of person you could call at 2 a.m. and he'd leap out of bed and rush to your side, not only with support, but with a toolbox, a cell phone, and 75 different possible solutions to whatever it was you were facing. He loved to entertain and enjoyed cooking on his big green egg and drinking fine wine and spirits. He lived for his vacations, our escape from the real world, to relax at the beach and spend time with family and often close friends. And what the outside world didn't know back then was that Adam suffered from severe depression and anxiety. We'd been married for several years before I even knew. Sure, sometimes he was a little defensive. He complained that he wasn't able to sleep. I know that he was very stressed out and had a hard time recovering from certain situations. Tell me what's going on, I'd say. I'm fine, he'd reply, and he'd change the subject. I'd say, do you think you should talk to somebody? Absolutely not. I don't even want to talk to you about it. Can we talk about something else? Adam was a rock, or he seemed to be. He was able to deal with it all. We suffered through infertility, 2 miscarriages, job stresses, moving to a new town with few friends nearby, and he got me through all of it. Then there was one time. My son Ethan was a little guy, probably 1 year old. I had to go out of town for a weekend, and I left Ethan home alone with Adam, and Adam had a really bad day. When I came home, Adam told me that if Ethan hadn't been there, if he had been home all alone that day, he wouldn't have made it through the night. He never told me what his plan was specifically, but I know it involved his motorcycle. We sold the motorcycle soon after, and it was then, when he almost took his life the first time, that I truly learned about his depression. And it was only then that he started to try and seek help. He went to several different doctors. He didn't want to talk. He just wanted medication to make him feel better. He got some sleeping pills and some anti-anxiety medication, and it helped a little. He seemed to be a little bit happier, a little less short-fused, a little more involved and interested in Ethan's and my life. And I was sworn to secrecy. No one was allowed to know. That Adam took some prescribed medications and suffered from a mental illness, it would make him look weak. It would keep him from progressing in his work. Our family and friends would judge him and think he wasn't good enough. No one could know. And I didn't really know anything about mental illness. Adam did. All those nights he didn't sleep, he read and he learned. So I listened to him and I kept my promise. We moved back to Atlanta as we were living in Alabama at the time, and it was a roller coaster for him. He had a new job where he wasn't treated well. He changed jobs and he still hadn't found his niche. And let me be clear, Adam was a dedicated worker and supremely good at what he did. His employees called on him to be a mentor, and he was always the right-hand man for his boss. However, he just wasn't happy. I remember we spoke and he would tell me about different opportunities that he learned about. And one time I said, I wish you could just find something that makes you happy. You never seem happy. I don't care what you make. I don't care where we live. Just do something that makes you happy. He was so upset. I thought I was being supportive, but I had blown his cover. What do you mean I don't seem happy? What do I do that makes me seem unhappy? He still saw his psychiatrist in Alabama about every 6 months. He told his doctor that everything was great and the medication was refilled. And he came back home and continued. Then he told me he was fine and then disappeared into our room to watch TV alone. We went through life as everyone does, with ups and downs, job losses, family situations, amazing vacations, new jobs. Then we went through a time when everything was really great. We both had new jobs. We'd recently bought a new house. Ethan was starting kindergarten, and it was such a high to be exactly where you want to be with all the people you want to be with. But like all good things, it slowly came to an end. Adam's work got more stressful. I became pregnant with our daughter and had various pregnancy complications, and Adam started to withdraw. He would get home from work and not want to talk. He told me it was because he'd been entertaining customers all day. He would disappear into our room to watch TV. He would ask not to attend various plans we had. He wasn't sleeping well again, and the medicine wasn't helping anymore, but he didn't want more, and he did not want to go back to the doctor anytime soon. He insisted that he didn't need more help, and he refused to speak with anyone. And still, no one could know, because our friends would judge him. He wouldn't get that promotion he was vying for. And to be sure, I'm no saint here, because by this time I was a mom with 2 kids and a full-time job. I was tired, I was short-fused, I was angry, I was nervous about how things were going to be. But he would apologize for something that happened 2 weeks ago. What are you talking about? I would say. I never gave that a second thought, and I certainly wasn't mad about it. I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. One time I mentioned to Adam that I wanted to go to therapy, that I didn't think I was coping well, and he got really mad. You're fine. Nothing's wrong with you. You aren't the one who has all this anxiety. It was really hard. I really felt all alone because on the one hand, I knew I couldn't continue to overlook my stress and occasional sadness and take a backseat to him. But on the other hand, I couldn't load any more onto his plate. He had enough to handle. Then in October, he lost his job. I offered to come home, and he told me he needed to be alone, to zone out. And like I had done so many other times, I respected his wishes. I gave him his space. And in that time, he went out and he purchased a gun. He made me dinner that night. He was so upset and told me he couldn't look me in the eye. I didn't know what to say to him either. I was tired, I was sad, I was scared. Scared for him and going through the awful process of looking for a new job, wondering how I was going to help him fill his time without drowning in his depression, worried about if we were going to be able to keep the house, keep the kids in daycare, literally how we were going to be able to make it through. By the way, I was not to tell anyone that he had lost his job. He told me he was in really bad shape, that he has called his doctor and made an appointment for the next morning. Again, his doctor was still in Alabama, so he had to leave really early in the morning to arrive right when the office opened. He took a shower, he got dressed, put on a nice shirt. He took Ethan to the bus stop and left for his doctor. I offered to go with him, but he said no, he needed to be alone. I never saw my husband again. At the funeral and the months that followed, so many people were shocked. And with shock and sadness come the comments, the things that people say, some good, some not, mostly with good intentions. But I heard so many comments. Adam seemed so strong. He saved my life a few years ago. Let me tell you what he did. I looked up to him so much. Jen, why didn't you ever tell me? But the worst thing I heard was Adam was a coward. How dare he do that to you? To be clear, I still say that Adam was one of the strongest people I will ever meet. He told me one time that he had suicidal thoughts since he was 16 years old. That means that he overcame for 20 years. Despite being surrounded by family and friends, he suffered alone and in silence for 20 years before he lost his battle. He was a warrior who loved me like no one else will ever love me, who idolized his children, especially Ethan. And he fought all that sadness and all that hopelessness and despair for a long, long time so he could be there with us and be there for us. And the disease won. You're probably sitting there thinking, why did you let him walk out the door if he was so upset? Why didn't you tell anyone he was so sick? Why didn't you insist that he get help? You can't help it. I'm sure you're sitting there wondering what it was really like and how you would have done it differently. When I tell you that I relived that 24 hours, in fact, that whole year that led up to that horrible day over and over again. And I wish I had, or I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd said this, or I hadn't said that. I wish I'd let that go. I wish I hadn't let him walk out the door. I wish. I wish I could have changed my story and saved his life one more time. Now, I can Monday morning quarterback the last year of his life, and I often do, because there were signs, a lot of them, I didn't know. I did the best I could with what I had, and I have to accept that. I can't change the past, but I can affect the future. I can tell you what I know now. I can hopefully help you and your loved ones recognize the signs. He had so many: withdrawal, anger, sleeplessness, hopelessness, mood swings, a strong desire to keep up the appearance of being great. But the thing I want to tell you the most about is keeping secrets. I'm not talking about the little things, the private moments, your salary. Keep those secrets and treasure them. I'm talking about the things that shouldn't be kept a secret. Major life events, good and bad. I can't tell you how many times I was not allowed to tell people about things. And then he would bring them up at a dinner party and people would say, Jen, I can't believe you didn't tell me about that. I lost friends over keeping secrets. But of course, my marriage was more important than those people, so I justified it. Secrets are exhausting. There have been people who have opened up to me over the past several years. They tell me that their spouse had a problem with depression and they're not able to talk to anyone about it because they promised to keep a secret. And so they both suffer alone. And the whole time they're talking, each and every one of them, all I can think is, that's my story. That was my exact same situation. But guess what? I wasn't alone, and neither are you. So why do I tell you my sad story? Because I want to scream from the top of my lungs to anyone who will listen. If you suffer from anxiety, from depression, or any other mental health issue, don't keep it a secret. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not a weakness. It's a disease. Yes, you can ask for help. You can find someone to talk to. And if you're here listening to me, I want you to remember that you are important. You have value. Keep fighting, but don't do it alone, because you're really not alone. So tell that to yourself. Tell that to your spouse, to your children, to your friends, to everyone you meet. Don't make negative comments about mental health. Support initiatives that increase mental health coverage with insurance companies. Don't make suicide a punchline and a joke. Depression and anxiety aren't something to avoid just because they aren't pretty. And be kind to everyone, because even the happiest person you know might be privately suffering. And let people help you, because you know what? They really want to help you. If you know someone who suffers from this disease, be there for them. Understand that this is a problem with the chemicals in their brain. Don't tell them to get over it. Think about the silent messages you might be saying. A couple of years ago, when I was originally kind of putting my story together in writing, someone on Facebook announced that their son had been diagnosed with depression. And she realized that they'd been giving a silent message to their son that says, you've been giving everything and have so many gifts. What could you possibly be depressed about? And that was so well said, because sometimes we judge in ways that we don't even realize, but people still feel it. And most importantly, seek help. And if you can't convince someone you love to seek help, raise your hand and get help for yourself. There are resources, advice, and assistance out there for everyone to help you be better informed about what you can do or what you can say. I'm still regularly attending my therapy to deal with my grief and to deal with the situations going on in my life. But despite that, I can't change my story. I can't bring Adam back. I can't give my kids their father, but there is something I can do. I can change your story. Maybe. There are a lot of warriors out there, probably here listening right now, tonight. Let's work together and give them some new weapons to fight with. Access to affordable mental health care, a shoulder to lean on with no stigma, no judgment. Let's provide them with what they need so that maybe just one more person has the strength to get through another day and another day after that. Thank you.
Well, bless you for sharing that. The ironic thing, among so many ironic things, is that, I've been in practice for more than 40 years, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say that they are looking at a couple just like you and Adam and wishing that they could only be as happy as you, because they only see the surface, right? And,
Mhm.
you know, it's very hard to get through to them that, you know, that talking about it and sharing it is what eases the burden, if anything. So welcome to Mental Health Awareness Month. You know, this is like, I'm not sure what I want to say after that. I kind of just want to let you kind of be with what you're feeling. But Rabbi, do you want to say
Yeah,
something?
I mean, I'm, as you know, I'm blown away by your story. I've told you that, and it was hard for me to believe when I just finished reading the story before we met last time, and then you were there. So now you're celebrity status. But what amazes me more than anything else is really, and I'd like to know like how this happened, because the courage that it takes to get to where you are. And again, you might not think it's courage and you think it's all natural, but there's something amazing about going from this shock, this horror, this disbelief, this feeling like people are looking at you, accusing or whatever, you should have done this, that, and the other. And here you are, you know, 4.5 years later, taking your time, your energy, not saying, oh, listen, I got to take care of my family, I'm a sorry person, but no, you decided to take this from a very different angle. And I'd like to know what went through your mind, and how did you do it? I mean, how did this transform to something like what you're doing now?
Thank you. I'm honored by the question, truthfully. And it's a lot of things. You know, I really wouldn't have survived, if that's the word, without the support of my people, all of my people. They're my friends, my family, friends of friends, family who I didn't know were family. I mean, so many people came and shared, came and supported me physically, came over to my house, it was pre-COVID, came over to my house and held me up, brought me food, brought me gifts, called. So many people shared so many stories about how amazing Adam was as a friend, as a mentor, as a family member. And then the stories started coming in of, I hate to ask you, but did this happen? Don't tell anybody, but I'm dealing with this. And I really learned that, you know, you can't change the past. I don't want to say you could prevent something like this, because you can't. But at the same time, that became my drive, is how can I help other people know that they shouldn't hide in their rooms, that they shouldn't be ashamed, that this is something real, that you can't shake it off, that you can't ignore it, it doesn't go away. In fact, when you do that, it gets worse. So if, you know, I can convince one person truly to raise their hand, to find help, to, you know, reach out to a best friend. Like, help doesn't always mean call a therapist. Help doesn't always mean go to JFNC. It can, right? Help doesn't mean call the Blue Dove Foundation, although you're welcome to when you have no place to turn. But help is calling your mother, calling your brother, calling your best friend, because I promise you that they would do anything they could to save you. And you just need to, and it takes a lot of courage. It's not easy to ask for help. And I had to learn how to ask for help. You know, at first, if you know me personally, I'll admit I'm a bit stubborn. And I was like, no, I got this. And I finally had to be like, I don't got this. I'm a single mom with 2 kids and I have a full-time job. And I have these people who want to pick up my daughter from school and bring her home so I don't have to next Tuesday. Like, I have to, because I really can't do it by myself. And if I had to rely on all these people, then, you know, everyone, and you know, that's what carried me through, where I don't have to anymore, you know, more than a normal person. But, you know, that's really what drives me, is to let other people know that when people offer to help, they mean it. And so when you need help, take the help, ask for the help, seek it out. And chances are they're going to say, you feel that way too, because I just helped so-and-so, and here's some ideas. And that's what I want everybody to really know and understand.
I mean,
There's a question here from the audience. When I sense that someone's depressed, but they haven't said anything, how can I best approach that?
I think I'll answer first. And, I'm just someone who unfortunately has some experience in this. I'm in no way licensed in any fashion or form. But I think it's the, if you say to somebody, are you depressed? And they didn't tell you, they're going to, no, I'm fine. But I think when you say, hey, if you ever want to talk, I'm here, and just kind of make it a nonchalant thing where hopefully they'll hear you. And, Rabbi, you're much more experienced in counseling people than I am. Dr. Delfin, you as well. But I mean, it's just that, hey, if you need anything, I'm here, just so you know. And hopefully that will make them a little more comfortable. Anybody else want to answer?
Yeah, no. You're muted.
You're silent.
Sorry.
Quiet the sound.
Many years when I was in my 20s living in Washington, and someone said to me, I don't think you're as happy as you can be. And I'm just going to give you a name, and you don't have to call this person. It's a psychologist who I think you might want to speak to at some point. And I was like, oh, I don't need that. And then a few days later, I decided that, yeah, I'm going to give this guy a call. And it was the best thing I ever did because, I mean, he literally changed my life. And I go through those struggles. I've experienced depression for many years, which is also part of the reason that I was drawn to this book. And so I think approaching it that way, sort of in a roundabout way, without accusing someone of being depressed, just, very kindly saying, some, like adding on to what Jennifer was saying, something going on, I'm there for you. I'm here to help you. And, just thinking that, just sort of coming in that way is, I think, very helpful at times.
Yes, in other words, it's an invitation. The door is open.
Right.
Please walk in. The language we use is subtle and powerful. If you ask the question, how are you? The answer will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because we learn from a very early age that the right answer to how are you is fine, that there is a right answer, and that's the right answer, and anything else is the wrong answer. If you ask what's wrong, the answer will be nothing.
Nothing.
Because the question, what's wrong, is really what's wrong with you? How are you wrong? People don't answer that question with anything other than nothing. Right? There's another question about warning signs different for children and adults. And Lisa, you wanted to respond to that, I think?
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm on the board of the Blue Dove Foundation and have the pleasure of working with Sherry and Jennifer. And everybody on the board of the Blue Dove Foundation has been personally impacted by mental health. And two of my children have serious acute depression and suicidal ideation. So I just want to share in response to the question, if the signs are different for children and adults. There's a lot of similarities, but when it comes to children, sometimes they don't get help for quite a while because they're written off as, oh, they're just a moody teenager, or they're just quiet, or they're just shy, or unfortunately, if it's a boy, a lot of times, oh, boys just don't really talk about these things. So we excuse some of those things and can overlook them. And I think parents' instincts, we have to be careful not to just write it off as a moody teenager. And a lot of times, especially teens, they will drop hints, but we have to pick them up. And it's not an easy thing to do.
I think it's very, I was in Baltimore and in Atlanta, both of those places, and the subject was the same when I went to talk, and it was about stigma. The stigma, it's probably the biggest reason why parents themselves will not want to admit to themselves, or like, because where's this going? Does this mean like now I have, a big problem on my hands, or hoping for the best, it's avoidance. It's wishful thinking. And sometimes they're not wrong, but the interesting thing is parents are usually very intuitive. My wife could know what's wrong with my child, she knows if it's this or that. It's so amazing. And then sometimes when it comes to mental health, we kind of shut down and we don't want to go there. And the person themselves, like Jennifer was saying, they don't allow you to go there. So you agree with what they're doing, and it's kind of hard to get involved. And I think that one of the things that I find very useful is that I sometimes will say to someone who's having a hard day, I mean, again, because they think that they're being looked at negatively, like Dr. Delfin was saying, people are looking at you like, hey, what's wrong with you? But if you say, hey, listen, I'm having a rough day, how are you? Are you having the same kind of day? And sometimes they'll say, yeah, I'm feeling that too. And then the conversation starts, and then you could say anything. You could say, hey, listen, I'm here to help you. I love you. We can talk about whatever. And when people once you open that channel, people will talk. You'll be surprised what they'll say. So I think it's important to do that. And I think it's amazing, Lisa, that you're here as well to talk about your story. It's not an easy thing to come out, and as we said, in the community, in the Jewish community, there's always, what are other people going to say? I think that because we're close in the community, so it feels like you're being, labeled. And I think that this conversation is making people aware of it. And there's so many people. Mental health is all over the place. People are just very, and all of a sudden we're all in the same boat. We all have issues. And I think that that's really what comes out of this conversation. I just want to say one more I guess I think it's important. I'll just say, I think the word is hope. This is what I think about, like, all day, all the time, and when I'm dealing with people. If I can give people hope, because when people lose hope, that's when things happen. A lot of things, it's not, but things go downhill. But when people feel hopeful and they see the light, and I think a lot could be done. And I think it was after 9/11, if you see something, say something. Just say something positive. Just lift people up. You never know what one word could do. We know what one word can do to ruin someone's day. That we know. Believe it or not, that one word, that kind word you share with someone, you look nice, even whatever, even someone you don't know that well, you just say something nice to them, and that could change their day. And that, that can change their thinking for that minute. And that minute could be so valuable, because that could stop them from, taking the train to somewhere no good.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. As a parent, how do we encourage boys especially to be comfortable sharing their emotions?
Paul, what do you say?
Well,
That's
I
a
think
great
we do it. I
question.
think we do it by sharing our own emotions, first of all.
Transference.
And by not punishing them for, showing their emotions. I mean, a phrase that I remember from my childhood is, quit your crying or I'll give you something to cry about. And yeah, I love the head's nod. All right. So, especially in my generation, I guess a lot of people grew up hearing that. It was, suppress your emotions. Big boys don't cry, or just boys don't cry, or variations on that theme, that there's something wrong about letting your emotions show. Like you said, Jen, that it would be weak, that it would be, frowned upon, that it would be criticized. But we really have to do it ourselves, and we have to do it, as you say, Rabbi, in kind ways. I think if we could if we could be kind and be honest and say what we feel and ask for what we want, and remember that we don't always get everything that we ask for, that would help a lot. It seems to me that that would help a lot. What do you all think?
I would love to pose that question to Lisa, given that I have only boys. So of course it's an interesting question for me, but I don't have an answer. But Lisa has both boys and or 2 girls and a boy. So is there a difference?
Well, I will share with you a little bit personal from an anecdote, and then more of a hopeful message professionally. And one is that my daughter Yael has a twin brother. So as she was going through the depths of her depression and actually wrote a suicide note that was found at school, and was getting, thank God, the intensive treatment that she really need. And now she says her resting face is a smile. So we are behind the crisis. We were advised by counselors and teachers, like, don't forget about Jacob. I mean, he's the twin brother, how's he doing? Because our house obviously was, going through the storm. And so I would say to Jacob, my husband would say, Jacob, if you're not comfortable talking to us, why don't we get somebody for you to talk to? And he's like, no, Mom, I'm fine. I don't need anybody to talk to. I don't want to go. And he's like, I got my friends. I don't need to talk to them. I don't need a counselor. I don't need a therapist. And he was adamant about it. I have no doubt he would have benefited from it, but he was a 15-year-old boy at the time and he wanted nothing to do with it. So we kept a close eye on him, although you never really know. And I think if a boy's doesn't think it's for him, that you can't push them. But I do think you say it's really okay just to talk to somebody. And if they're not comfortable talking to a parent, it doesn't have to be a therapist. It could be a youth leader at their synagogue if they're involved with that. It could be a coach at the sports team. It could be, a science teacher if that's who he connects with. But I think explicitly asking the boys, okay, so if you did, listen, I understand you don't want to talk to anybody now, but if you did, tell me 2 people that you would actually want to have a conversation with, or you'd feel comfortable having a conversation with. And even if the boy won't give you the names, just to plant that idea helps them to think to the next step. If I'm ready, or if I really think I need it, where would I go? Because sometimes it's hard for boys to fill in that blank of what would I do next. So for me, I think that asking them the question, even if you don't have the answer, they know the answer. And so that helps to give, especially younger boys, a tool. And then I'll tell you, and like what Paul was saying, we are actually working with the Federation of Jewish Men's Club, which is the conservative movement's Brotherhood Association. They have an amazing program called Hearing Men's Voices, and they are having parlor meetings about sensitive subjects. This year, we're working with them on a program around mental health. They've also done it around sexual assault and other sort of topics in the community. And so when you can get men together and talking about it, those messages also resonate with boys, whether it's around a barbecue grill or a basketball court. It doesn't have to be in a therapist's office for them to get that support. So sometimes with boys, you gotta be creative.
I wonder, Rabbi, how we as a community, and specifically a Jewish community, can sort of rally around in that fashion. And actually, somebody asked a question sort of related to that, a question for you. In Jewish tradition, how are suicides and mental illness viewed?
That's a brilliant question. We'll go with the easier one first, and then we'll go into the more complicated one. So on a personal level, for the last 20 years, I turned my Shabbos table into some type of, you can call it an AA meeting or whatever you'd like to. It's just the difference between our Shabbos table and AA meeting. We have a lot of food. But what happens is we go around the table, everyone gets to share something. And it usually is like, it's amazing when someone says, oh no, I have nothing to share, I have nothing to share. And it's like the pressure's on because it's your turn. And, you know, sometimes you give people a pass, but most of the time people will eventually get to the, you know, get to the soapbox and start. And the most amazing, amazing, amazing things are said. I'm always amazed because I think I've heard it all. And then the next Shabbos, I'll hear something else and another story and another heartfelt thing, or seeing the wheels turning in people's minds and watching other people say their story, as Lisa was saying. So once you get people talking, I think that is very powerful. And Paul, you've been to my classes. I'll talk about, I think I do, I talk about my personal challenges sometimes. I think it's important to say, hey, listen, I got a lot to worry about. It doesn't mean you have to have a mental health issue, or it doesn't mean you have to feel, you know, like you want to hurt yourself or anything, but you struggle with something. And the idea of making struggle a normal thing and talking about even the Bible, how people struggled throughout the Bible. You see Adam and Eve struggled, and Cain and Abel, and Noah struggled, and you keep on going down. Moses struggled, Isaac struggled, Abraham struggled, Jacob struggled, Joseph and his brother struggled. What more do you need? David didn't struggle. So the idea of pointing to the idea that men struggle, and Ethan, right? We make this normal. The Torah could have said, oh, Moses was this perfect guy. He had no problems. Everything was good. He's the holy, holy, holy guy. And that would have been the end of it. But no, the Torah talks about his trials and tribulations and all the things. I think this is very, very important for us to transmit as a Jewish community, that the Torah is a book that teaches us not only about mitzvot, about mental health and about family strife and about good things and bad things, all sorts of things. And that we have to find a way, a maze out of it, and find the highest truth. So I think when you do it together as a group, it's a lot easier than when a person's isolated. And so that taking people out of isolation is what we think we want to do, and we do it, and I think it's great. It works. It works. I've seen it work. So I mean, that's the good news. The more tough question, Paul, I wish you didn't ask it, is about how the Torah and how. So the Torah says that if someone intentionally kills themselves, they're looked upon in a certain way, you know, not in a good light. But in my experience over the years of my work, when we had these circumstances, not one of them was ever treated any differently than anyone else that died from a heart disease or some other disease. And the question is why? Because what happened in the Hebrew terminology is called ma'abed ladas. Someone does it with his mind, you know, with his right mind. But did you ever see someone do these kind of things in the right mind? The answer is no. And the last 20 years of my life, part of what I do, I try to talk about the disease of addiction, the disease of mental health, the disease of OCD. It's a mental disease. No one ever dies from breaking their foot. But on Shabbat, you're allowed to take them to the hospital, to the emergency room. No law will stop you, whether it's Yom Kippur, whatever, you have to act. Mental health, the disease of mental health will cause death. And that's why, and it's the worst part about it is when you look at a person's face, you cannot see the bleeding. You cannot see the bone sticking out. You cannot see the horrific tragedy, that the hemorrhaging that's going on. And the Torah, 1000%, I'm talking about the big rabbis. I consult with them. Sometimes we have a situation, I need to go and get some advice because I don't know the answer. And not one of them has ever said anything to the effect that it's not a disease, and that how those people should be treated with the greatest honor as they died from any other disease. And this is very important to transmit to people. We had a local story. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about the details, but you know, the family called me right away to say, "What do we do?" And I said, "You don't need to worry, but I'm going to cross-check." And there was no question how we needed to treat that person. We have recognized, the Torah has recognized that this is a real challenge and a real disease, and it has to be treated as such. And again, I think, was it you, Paul, that said, or someone told me today, I don't remember, it was yesterday, that committing suicide is not a disease or something. But I don't think that committing suicide or dying from suicide, what was the right terminology?
Dying by suicide.
Dying by suicide. If I got it wrong, please forgive me. But I think it's a symptom of the disease. It might not be a disease itself, but it's a symptom of a person having a very dark moment in their life where they cannot help themselves. And that's why we have to help them. I'm sorry for the long answer. Could have been worse. I always like to tell the story about the Atlanta CNN. A guy who worked in CNN, goes on the he goes to the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or whatever it was. He tells the rabbi, "Wow, that hour sermon, you did a great job." He says, "Do you think you could come on the show tomorrow for 2 minutes and give us a summary?" And the rabbi says, "Absolutely." He's thinking he's going to be on CNN. He says, "So if you can do it in 2 minutes tomorrow, why couldn't you have done it today in 2 minutes?" No, it's funny in person, the joke. Over Zoom, it's not that.
Amanda, do you have any other questions in your box there that I don't have?
We have another anonymous question. How would you help someone who continuously says that no one can help?
Paul?
Well, you just have to keep listening. I mean, if it's me, if somebody, it's like I haven't listened long enough. And people will throw that up as a way of testing whether anybody who says they want to help really means it. They will throw that up as a way of hiding and hoping that you let them hide. They will throw that up hoping that you'll try to talk them out of it. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons for saying that sentence, that no one can help. And there's no magic answer to that I know of. Maybe some of you do, but to me, it's just, okay, well, I'm going to be here with you until we figure out something different. And it becomes, after a while, hard to maintain the idea that no one can help when clearly someone is actually there. And that's what you do. And by the way, it takes a long time. It takes a very long time.
There's a reason they use the definition. They say, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting different outcome. There's no question about it that a lot of people don't have sometimes they feel really cornered, and they actually rightfully feel that there is no help. And I could see why they would say that. But we know, and we, no question about it, that if you're at it long enough, you can give people hope. And when people see hope and they see light, they gravitate to that. When it's dark outside and there's light, people gather around the light because that's a place to be. And I think we need to create, the person asking the question, and I know it's not easy, but sometimes you create enough light that the person will gravitate towards that. And light means hope. Light means, it doesn't mean yelling at people or making them feel bad about that there's they're wrong, but telling them there is hope over and over again. And it's like the famous story with Rabbi Akiva, that he was an old man, he was 40 years old, that's very old, right? And he was watching the water drip on the stone. And for many years, he saw this water, and eventually the water made a hole in the stone. And he said, well, if that's the case, then my thick head can probably study Torah. And now we have this famous rabbi, Rabbi Akiva, who after seeing that, he was, I think, 40 years old and went to study Torah for the first time in his life. So the idea of persistency, of consistency, of being in a peaceful way, that message could get through, and it will get through. And I think we gotta keep these conversations going. And I think the more we do it, the more change we are going to see.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think people are getting more comfortable. We're getting a lot more questions. And so
Okay,
I just
now
want to
we're
make sure
talking.
that we keep things going. This one's for Jennifer. What can we say to someone if they lose a family member to suicide? Is I'm sorry enough?
Of course. I think, it's just as, there's nothing you can say, right? There's never anything you can say when you lose someone, regardless of the situation. It doesn't erase the pain. So when you're saying, I'm so sorry, or when you're saying, how can I help? That's your way of saying, I love you, I care about you, and I'm here for you. And anything else that you say and anything that happens after that is gravy. It's the fact that you opened your mouth or opened your arms and said, hi, I'm here. And so, there's never a right thing to say, but I think if you're saying something and you're there, then you're doing the right thing.
Thank you. Lisa also just put in the chat some resources about what to say and not to say at a Shiva house with someone who's survived, a family that has survived suicide. I know there was a question earlier also about what, in the long term, not the immediate is the I'm sorry, but what do you say to make sure that you're kind of checking in on somebody who you think might be depressed, but also checking in on a family who might be experiencing grief?
I think that it was, in the first couple of weeks, and again, I was very fortunate. I have some amazing people in my life, but in the first couple of weeks, there were a ton of people who came over, who called. But then 3 months later, somebody would call out of the blue. Or even now, a friend of mine who I was very close to in high school, and we drifted apart for no other reason than, she moved one place and I still live here and all of that. And 2 weeks ago, she reached out to me on Facebook and she said, I think about you all the time. How you hanging in there? And I think that's what you do. You remember to continue to be there, not just in the week and the month that follows, but all of those people who continue to be there 6 months later and a year later, just to say, you okay, Jen? Yeah, I'm actually okay. Thank you. I think that's important.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, please. Did you have something else?
Nope. I'm going to let somebody else answer the other half of the question.
What would you say to someone who, is struggling with depression? Is there a right thing? We kind of talked about it a little bit about checking in, but I guess the sort of the long-term check-in points. Lisa?
Sure. I will tell you, unfortunately, I learned this the hard way through personal experience, there's depression and then there's depression. If somebody's in a funk, they're having a bad day, but if they literally can't get out of bed for 2 weeks, they haven't showered in a week or two, they're really just not functioning. That's when you really have to get the professional help. And it's not a simple solution, especially if that person isn't ready to get the help yet. But I think there is a big responsibility if it's a member of your family or a close friend and you feel like you're the one looking out for them when they're not able to look out for themselves. And you do the best you can. Sometimes that's good enough. And sometimes, it's not enough of what they really need. So it's a very scary time for the person who's trying to give that care. I will tell you, when my daughter was at risk for suicide, and it was a very hard thing to get out. But our therapist advised us, and this is now common advice, you have to explicitly say, there's two questions. At the end of the night, I would say to my daughter, so do you want to die? And you have to use the specific words. Do you want to kill yourself or do you want to die? If the answer is no, then you say, okay, great, have a good night. If I'm being a little funny, sorry, that's my coping skill. If the answer is yeah, then there's a follow-up question you have to ask, which is, do you have a plan? Do you know how, have you thought about how you're going to do this? And if that answer is yes, that's an immediate alarm has to go off. You have to get that person immediate help. That's when you take them to the closest emergency room for a psych evaluation. So I was told, and this is very hard for me to sit with me because it still doesn't make sense to me in my brain. I'm just being totally honest. I've been told by many therapists that that it's okay to have suicidal ideations, to think about suicide. And I have a daughter who thought about suicide every day for a year, sometimes a couple of times a day. And now her resting face is a smile. She's great. She got through it. But that was how her brain chemistry worked at the time. I'm a big believer in medication. You know, she got medication and therapy and she's doing great. But to understand that suicidal thoughts can be normal is a hard concept to accept, especially as a parent, because it's very, very, very scary, because we can't see the bone sticking out of their arm and know they got to go to the emergency room for triage immediately. And you can only go on what the person's telling you. And if the person is saying they're fine, or they feel okay, or I'm all right, that's what we have to go on. So it's a challenging thing, but there is sometimes a misnomer in the Jewish community. If you ask the person about suicide, you could make it worse. You could make them then go think to that dark place. You're not going to make it worse. They already have those thoughts. It's our responsibility to help understand how bad those thoughts are, and if it needs emergency treatment or more long-term ongoing treatment. Again, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a clinician. My biggest job responsibility is a mom. But these are the things I have learned in walking our mental health journey. And clinicians now very much say, if you have somebody who you think is at risk, you have to use those words or some words you're comfortable with that they understand what you're saying. Like, are you safe? You know, because safety is number one. And those conversations, you could literally save a life, you know, and the person hearing the question is not going to be shocked. They're going to be amazed maybe that you get them when other people won't have the courage to ask those questions. So that's my response.
Thank you. We have another question for either Lisa or probably Dr. Delfin. Somebody asked years ago, they were told that in order to get their 14-year-old child an appointment with a psychologist, they needed the child's approval because she was old enough to know what was in her best interest. Does that still stand true today?
Oh, I hate that question, but I'll give you the answer. That question actually refers to the law in Pennsylvania, which is called the Mental Health Procedures Act. And what it states is, number one, that someone who's 14 years old can voluntarily enter into treatment without the permission of his or her parents. They can make an independent decision to enter into mental health treatment. That's part one. Part two is that the parents of a 14-year-old can bring that 14-year-old into treatment. The 14-year-old does not have to agree to the treatment. For all practical purposes, unless you are dealing with a 14-year-old who is clearly in danger of hurting herself or trying to kill herself, and therefore can be involuntarily admitted to a hospital, bringing an obstreperous 14-year-old to an outpatient counselor and saying, now get in there and talk to that person. Not much is likely to happen, but I mean, I can't say it never happens, because sometimes refusing to go is, the child protesting too much, and or it's like Brer Rabbit saying, now please don't throw me in the briar patch, right? Because they really want to get in there, but they don't want to admit that they want to get in there. So when they get in there, stuff happens. That's the long answer. The short answer is the 14-year-old can walk in under her own power without parental permission. The parents can bring in the 14-year-old.
And I think the second part, correct me, Paul, if I'm wrong, they're not allowed to leave treatment without parent consent until 18. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that's correct. If the 14-year-old enters treatment voluntarily, the 14-year-old may leave treatment voluntarily.
Okay.
As I understand it.
Okay.
This, by the way, this is why I don't work with kids. Please.
It's
They
very
can drive you to
complicated.
drinking.
Please give me an adult. Yeah.
So we have another question. Where can someone go for help if they don't have the financial resources?
Well, they can, of course, go to clergy if they're so inclined. Berks County, like every county in Pennsylvania, has a county mental health office. In Berks County, it's called Service Access Management, or SAM. They'd be in the phone book if we had phone books anymore, but there's a mental health crisis number, a local mental health crisis number, by which you reach Service Access Management, and they can talk to you about getting care and treatment for people who are financially unable to do it themselves. But they are also, so the Jewish Federation has Jewish Family Services, which is a resource for people, and doesn't ask you how much you make. And there are other, similar resources through nonprofits in the county. The Berks County, it's not called the Mental Health Association anymore. They changed their name, but there's the Berks County Mental Health Association, which is another resource for the same thing.
I always joke around. I say, what's the difference between a therapist and a rabbi? I said $350 an hour, go to the rabbi. But I can tell you, one of the things that I've been vocal about is, I speak to many, many rabbis who call me from all over the United States, from Australia, all over the place, who deal with crisis, and they're aware that I'm involved. And one of the things I repeat over and over again, not every situation do you need to solve yourself. It's nice that people come to you and they recognize you and they feel like you're going to help them, but don't do a job you're not qualified. I mean, be happy to involve counselors, therapists. Don't try to drive the bus. I mean, sometimes you can in certain situations, but the awareness of what you know and what you don't know is very, very important. I'm just putting it out there because and generally over the years, I try to push people to get their permanent counselor and therapist they're always welcome to call me. That's a great knowing, I'll give everyone my cell phone, call me anytime kind of thing. But I think the idea of getting, and rabbis need to, even in therapy, it's consultation. You want to involve other specialists, and talk to them about it, and try to find out the right answer, because it's always a progress. It's a work in progress. Always trying to figure out. Every situation's different as far as I'm concerned, and it's not easy to solve the puzzle, or not even solve the puzzle, but it's not about solving. You can't always solve a problem. You could work with a problem. You could make things better. You could improve. And I think that's an important thing. It's a process.
By the way, in the book, there's a listing of national hotlines, which is also a really good resource.
I just
It's a really
posted
good
that.
book.
Yeah.
Get the book.
And
Yeah.
I added a list of resources in the chat too, that's on the Blue Dove website. Many of those are free to either call if you're in crisis or not in crisis, and find out what resources are available. I would also just like to add two other things. Now, especially, one of the blessings of COVID is that mental health is much more in the forefront than it ever was before. And you can reach out to your primary care physician or to a pediatrician if you're talking about a child, and I'm pretty sure they have resources, and be honest with them. And if finances are an issue, say that. And they often know of other doctors who will do things on sliding scale fees, or have, financial assistance or other things. So I would reach out to your primary care provider. And one other thing I will say is we all have usually these tethered to our hands. Believe it or not, on Facebook, and I know that's a little controversial, there are some incredible online support groups. I volunteer as a moderator for 21,000 group of parents with children of anxiety and depression. And it's incredible what people post and how many other people are dealing with similar things. So there are dozens of Jewish specific mental health groups. It doesn't have to be Jewish, but there's a lot of online support groups that might be helpful depending on whatever your issue is. Take it with a grain of salt. There's some posts on there you think, oh no, but some of it can be really helpful information.
Lisa, could you post a link to that Facebook website, number one? Number two, Amanda,
Sure.
All this stuff on the side here in the chat, are we able to capture it and put it in an email so we can look at it later?
Yeah, absolutely. So tonight's program.
It's really helpful stuff. Like, even obviously I'm aware of some of it, but just being able to look at the material, I don't want to be distracted. I think it's great for people that are on here to be able to get it. I think it's wonderful stuff.
Yeah,
the other thing I
absolutely.
wanted to just say one more thing. There's never one more thing, but the idea of also, besides the person going through the problem, there's the family. And I think it's a very important thing to kind of always look at that simultaneously, that the husband, the wife, the child, the parents. I mean, I always make sure when I meet family to say, I'll talk about other stuff. So I don't want them to think that I'm objectifying them. I'm thinking, whenever I see you, I think, and by the way, I just meant to ask you, how's your daughter? And the other day I was somewhere, this is not even a woman that was part of the Jewish community, but she reached out to me a while back for her daughter. And I said, oh, by the way, how's your daughter? We were talking, and she said, if you asked me a week ago, I'd tell you perfect. But then, so the idea of being there for the family, and, just they're really going through a horrible time, and sometimes they don't know what to do. And you talking to them, you could actually, you might not find the solution, but maybe you will, just by chatting. And the other day I spoke to a different family, literally this week, and I said, I didn't want them to say, so how is your son doing? And I said, great. He's now a doctor, and it's 10 years since I met him, and he's amazing. And they were like so proud to tell me. And that's also nachas, it's also gives them a chance to, to be thankful, and for you to also recognize as the miracles. I mean, I'm blown away by some of the miracles I see. So I'm grateful for that.
All right,
My
thank you.
resting face is a smiley face. I like that one.
I love that. I love that too. Thank you so much to Jennifer for sharing your story, for sharing Lisa from the Blue Dove Foundation, Rabbi Lipsker, Dr. Delfin, thank you so much for helping moderate our conversation. I wish we could continue this even longer, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for attending. Tomorrow, I will send out a link with the recording as well as all the links that were shared in the chat tonight. Thank you so much for being here and stay well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.